Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today I am doing my June reading wrap up. I had an amazing reading month because I was out of town for 2 weeks, and so I read 8 books, which is way more books than I usually read. And it was a fantastic reading month. I gave no book 3 stars. So every book I gave at least 3.5 stars to. So that is an amazing reading month. And I didn't just read cozy mysteries. I also read some thrillers. I read a manga. So it was all around a fantastic month that I hope to reproduce again in July till I have to get back to school. So the first book that I read was Dictator by Robert Harris. This was the 3rd book in the Cicero trilogy. I made an entire video about that trilogy. It will definitely be one of my favorite books that I've read in 2024, if not my favorite book. Dictator, the 3rd in the trilogy, was my favorite of the 3 books. This one follows all of the drama of the late Republic, everything having to do with Caesar, except the story is told from Cicero's perspective, or rather, the perspective of his slave, Tiro. In the 3rd book, he receives his emancipation. If you've never read anything by Robert Harris, you should definitely read the Cicero trilogy. I will be reading everything else he has written. His historical fiction is well-researched, engaging. The characters are just so compelling. It's made me want to learn everything that I can about the late Republic and the early Roman Empire. 5 stars. The second book that I read in the month of June was Extinction by Douglas Preston. I picked up this book solely because of its premise. It reminded me so much of Jurassic Park. But actually, it's more realistic because while DNA from dinosaurs has not survived, so it cannot be extracted from dinosaur fossils, the DNA of woolly mammoths has survived and can and has been extracted. In this story, we have a park in Colorado where some scientist or group of scientists have de-extincted Pleistocene-era mammals, the woolly mammoth, the giant sloth, but only the herbivores, so not the saber-toothed tiger. And in this beginning of the story, you have a couple, the son of a billionaire and his wife, who are very outdoorsy, and they are brutally murdered under mysterious circumstances. And as we're following the story, we get to learn more about what happened. I called the twist. I saw it coming. I'd like to think that I was very clever, but some people in the comments said it was very obvious. I really enjoyed it. It was fast-paced. I look forward to reading more by Douglas Preston or reading the series by Preston and Child. I have not ever read anything by him, and this was really a lot of fun. 4 stars. The 3rd book that I read was The Skeleton Paints a Picture by Lee Perry. I think this is the 4th book in the Family Skeleton series. The relationship between Sid, the ambulatory skeleton, and Georgia Thackeray is just amazing. I read the series solely because of this friendship. And Sid reminds me so much of C-3PO, except he's more optimistic, he's more outgoing. In this book, Georgia Thackeray, who is an adjunct professor, takes up a new position at an art and design school. At the beginning of the story, she receives a package at her doorstep, and who jumps out from the package but Sid, her best friend, the skeleton who has been living with her since he was a child. In the 1st book, by the way, you learn about who Sid was when he was alive and how he was murdered. But in this book, Sid is walking around behind the house. It's dead of winter. Obviously, he can't feel cold or anything. And he sees a wrecked car, and he finds the body a short distance away from the car. Now, Georgia is interrogated by the police about who this victim is, and she says that she doesn't know who it is, but actually this woman was one of her colleagues at the university. She was the head of the writing center. So now people are suspecting that she did know who she was and that she bumped her off. And one of the best parts of the story is where Georgia is trying to explain how she came across various clues in the story without bringing in Sid, because obviously she can't say, I have this living skeleton who helps me in my investigations. So she has to find ways to explain how she came to her conclusions. If you like a series where the sleuth does the investigation and really steps you through everything, I think you will really like this series. The sleuth, Georgia, and Sid do the investigation. So I really like that. I gave it 3.5 stars, and I'm just sad that there are only 5 books in the series. This should have been one of those long-running series. It's just so much fun. The 4th book that I read was Skinwalkers by Tony Hillerman. This was my first Leaphorn and Chi mystery, and this most definitely will not be my last. In this book, and I think this is like the 7th in the series, so I didn't even start with the first book, Officer Chi, at the beginning of the story, survives an assassination attempt. Someone shoots through his trailer and misses, thankfully, and this is how Chi meets Lieutenant Leaphorn, who is at the same time investigating 4 different murders that he thinks are somehow connected in this Navajo reservation, potentially revolving around some Navajo folklore, because in each of these murders and the attempt on Officer Chi's life, there has been a marble, like a bone piece that has been found nearby, suggesting that someone has either thought that their victim was a witch, or they are the witch. And so there's some questions surrounding that. Lieutenant Leaphorn is concerned about his own personal life because his wife is losing her memory and he suspects that she has Alzheimer's. So there is that really tender moment in the story. I was really impressed with the details that Tony Hillerman put into a story about the Navajo people, the Dene. It makes me really interested in reading more about the series. And interestingly enough, this was not the only book that I read this month that deals with the American Southwest. So I guess I'm trying to read books that are revolving around the region of the country that I now live in. I gave this book 4 stars. The 5th book that I read was The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This was my first Ruth Ware book. It is gothic horror-esque. We're following a woman who takes up a position at this very extravagant manor to take care of 3 children. Yes, 3 children. There's 2 kids who are like elementary age, and then 1 is an infant. And she is supposed to be their nanny. Now, this house has a lot of smart technology that the father has installed, and this technology is really hard for her to learn, and it acts up a lot. And then she thinks that she's hearing voices in the attic. I enjoyed the story. I wasn't totally satisfied by all of the twists at the end. I was satisfied by some of the twists, so I gave the book 3.5 stars. But I donated the book to my mother-in-law, and she loved it. I definitely will be reading more by Ruth Ware. The 6th book that I read, which was another Southwest-related book, was The Pot Thief Who Studied Ptolemy by J. Michael Arendoff, which is book 2 of the Pot Thief series. This is a series that reminds me so much of the Bernie Roddenberry series by Lawrence Block. I wouldn't say that this is a cozy mystery series. There are some sexual innuendos, including it's fade to black, but you know, a relationship with a woman. In this series, Herbert Shoes is technically a pot thief. Now, he doesn't think of himself as one. He unearths artifacts from public land, which is illegal, but he thinks that what he's doing is justified. And throughout the series, you have someone who is doing some morally questionable things justifying his actions. So he's charming, but he's not like someone I would want to be friends with in life. Also, he's quite the alcoholic. He's drinking from the first page till the final page. He's having way too many margaritas. In this particular book, Herbie learns that a professor at the University of New Mexico, where he had been expelled when he was an anthropology student, had not actually returned the Native American pottery that he had claimed that he was going to return to the tribe. And so he decides that he's going to break into his apartment and retrieve those pots. And then, of course, the man is murdered. Herbert, he's not exactly a suspect because He's breaking into the apartment complex, and it's like really, really funny how he attempts to break into this high security luxury apartment complex. He has a friend named Susie, who's really just his friend. She's like in her early 20s. She's a student at the University of New Mexico, and they're just always talking to each other over margaritas and also trying to investigate this murder. Love it. Just like I said, Herbert is like the most charming but also like gray protagonist. It makes for a really interesting series. So I definitely look forward to reading book 3, and I gave this book 5 stars. I thought this was even better than book 1. The 7th book that I read was the 10th book in the one manga series. So we're almost done with the Arlong arc. I look forward to seeing how Luffy defeats Arlong. In this book, I love the character of Usopp. He reminds me a lot of Sokka in Avatar: The Last Airbender. He is the comic relief. He's also someone who doesn't have extraordinary abilities. So he's not like Luffy or, like Senji, who has this amazing kick, or, any of these other characters. And he starts off being a bit of a coward, but I think that he's growing into a really compelling hero, and I look forward to following his journey in the subsequent arcs. I gave this volume 4 stars. And then the 8th book that I read was Egg Drop Dead by Vivian Chen, which is the 5th book in the Noodle Shop series. So in this book, Lana Lee, who is now the manager of Holy Noodle House in the Asian village in Cleveland, is catering Donna Fang's birthday party. Donna Fang is a widow of Thomas Fang, who was murdered in the first book. She is now the silent co-manager of the Asian Plaza. And of course, there is a murder that Lana has to investigate. And in this one, Donna has a nanny named Alice, and she has this really ugly fight with Alice shortly before Alice is found dead. And then Lana finds a lot of incriminating information about Donna's family. And Donna thinks that since her father had been related to the Chinese mob, that perhaps the mob is trying to bump her off and trying to send her a message by killing someone very close to her, her nanny. This was a really solid mystery. I think that Lana has definitely matured a lot from the first book. I will say at times it's very cringy how intrusive Lana's questioning can be. Like, she asks questions of people she has no business asking questions of, and just, she's so pushy. But then she gets the information that she needs, and I just thought it was a really satisfying book. I gave it 5 stars. So this was an amazing reading month. Let me know if you've read any of these books. I am starting to return to nonfiction again. I mean, I do read nonfiction all the time, but, full books. So expect to see some nonfiction in my July reading wrap-up. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye now.